Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Lesson from the Quran by the thinker of the Quran, Allama Ghulam Ahmad Parwez Rahimahullah. Surah Al-Fatiha, verse 4. Reflection. My dear ones, now we have reached the fourth verse of Surah Al-Fatiha. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka. In the earlier lessons, you saw that in this great surah, even the very first few words beautifully bring forth the entire system of religion in a coherent form. That is, praise in its complete and perfect sense belongs only to Allah. And Allah is the one who possesses the most complete authority. His worthiness of praise is because He is Rabbil Alameen, the sustainer of the entire universe, not just of the worlds, but of mankind, of all nations, of the whole of humanity, of every living being. He nurtures them in such a way that starting from their point of origin, they gradually pass through stages of development until they reach their point of completion. This nurturing process is carried out through a program of rahimiyat, mercy. This is the general program which continues constantly, regularly, and progressively. But at times, when needed, His attribute of rahmaniyat, beneficence, also manifests, which is the second part of this program, meaning to provide means of growth suddenly in an emergency for someone. Yet such provision of growth can only be made by the one who has complete control over those resources. If these means and resources were under someone else's control, then that being could not nurture anyone. Therefore the next fundamental attribute is mentioned, Malik Yawmiddin 1:3. That system within which this nurturing continues to take place, in which control and authority belong solely to God. So up to this point, Surah Al-Fatiha tells us, this is that God, this is Allah, this is His system, this is His program spread across the entire universe. After this, naturally the question arises, if you have understood this, and now you have faith and conviction that indeed this is the system responsible for leading humanity to its destination, and for every individual too, who can say in his heart, this is the system in which my human abilities will be nurtured, and to such a degree that even after this life, I will be capable of progressing through further stages of development in the next life. Then when a person wholeheartedly accepts the truth of this, not emotionally, but with full clarity and insight, the next question is asked. Now, tell me, calmly and with full satisfaction, with the consent of your heart and mind, whose servitude will you choose? The one who has reflected upon these realities in this way, who has accepted them with the consent of heart and mind, who has become convinced of their truth, from his tongue no other words can emerge except Iyyaka na'budu. Tafsir of the words of Surah Al-Hamd, Iyyaka na'budu. The meaning of Iyyaka is you and only you. In this verse 1:4, it is said, we will accept yours and only yours authority. No one else is worthy of this. Now, dear ones, consider at what point Iyyaka na'budu 1:4 appears, what it means, and what a believing servant acknowledges. A believing servant, a Muslim servant, who has understood these realities, then begins a new kind of life for himself. He acknowledges, he makes a covenant, he sets a program. That life is the life of Iyyaka na'budu. We accept your servitude and only yours. Reflect on how great a program this is. But this is the program of Deen. When Deen was transformed into mere religion, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, then Na'budu was translated as worship. Thus, Iyyaka na'budu 1:4 became, we worship you alone. In this way God was made into an object of worship and we became merely worshippers. Think carefully about what impressions are imprinted on your mind by the word worship. Later I will explain the issue that arises when it is said that God created human beings only so that they may worship Him. What kind of concept of God this produces? But here, what is said is, we accept only your authority. This acceptance of authority means that we want to live only under that system which was described in the first 3 verses. We desire nothing else. This is Islam. And in accordance with it we want to establish our system, live under it, obey it, and accept its authority. This is the true meaning of na'budu, both linguistically in Arabic and in the Quran itself. The Quran's concept of ibadah. The Quran presents the concept of ibadah instead of worship. The root of the word ibadah is ab. The concept of worship does not exist in the Quran. You already know that this is the same root from which the word abd, servant, comes. And you also know that abd means slave or subject. In the Quran, this word is used precisely in the sense of slavery, subjection, and obedience. Let me present a couple of examples as evidence so you can see how the root abad gives rise to the words ibadah, na'budu, or ya'budu. All of these words carry the meaning of accepting authority and obedience, not worship. For instance, in Surah Ash-Shu'ara, when Prophet Musa, Moses, peace be upon him, went to Pharaoh and asked him to allow the children of Israel to go with him, Pharaoh said, "Moses, we have bestowed so many favors upon you, and this is how you repay us, by inciting your entire nation against us, to the extent that you do not even want them to remain here, but wish to take them away with you. Is this how you repay my favors?" In reply, Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, said, "An abbatta bani Israel," 26:22. Look at this word abbatta. It comes from the same root, abba. He said, "Your so-called favors are nothing, but that you have shackled my people in the chains of slavery and subjugation." From here, the meaning of abbatta becomes clear. Another example of the meaning of ibadah. In another place, when Prophet Musa and Prophet Aaron invited Pharaoh and the chiefs to believe in God, they replied, أَنُؤْمِنُ لِبَشَرَيْنِ مِثْلِنَا وَقَوْمُهُمَا لَنَا عَابِدُونَ 23:47. Shall we believe in two men who are just like us, while their people are subjugated to us? That is, in terms of being human, they are just like us, not superhuman. And in the same verse it is said, وَقَوْمُهُمَا لَنَا عَابِدُونَ 23:47, meaning their people are our subject people. So they argued, these are not superhuman, nor are they rulers among men. Their people are subjects under us. How could we then believe in them or accept their word? From this and similar verses, the reality becomes clear that ubudiyya, servitude, means to accept God's authority and submit to His laws. Servitude and authority in Surah Al-Kahf. In Surah Al-Kahf, the words servitude and authority are used as synonyms. Reflect on this. وَلَا يُشْرِكُ فِي حُكْمِهِ أَحَدًا 18:26. God does not share His right of governance with anyone. Here the word حُكْمِهِ 18:26 is used. Governance means authority, rulership. God does not allow anyone to share His sovereignty. وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا 18:10. Do not associate anyone in the servitude of your Lord. This verse tells us that whoever desires a pleasant and prosperous future must not associate anyone in the servitude of God. Notice, in one place it is said في حكمه 18:26, and in another بعبادته 18:17. This shows that ibadah carries the same meaning as hukm, authority, rulership. The meaning of ibadah under Quranic usage. In Surah Yusuf, Prophet Yusuf, Joseph, peace be upon him, said to his fellow prisoners, إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ 12:40. Remember, the right of governance belongs only to God. Reflect on this. What is the duty of a prophet? Even while imprisoned in the kingdom of a pharaoh-like ruler, he teaches his fellow prisoners that the right of governance does not belong to this king. It belongs only to God. A prophet considers every form of human rule over humans as rebellion against God. He accepts only God's authority. Then Yusuf, peace be upon him, continued, أَمَرَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهِ 12:40. He has commanded that you accept servitude to none but Him. Notice, first it was said, Al-Hukm belongs to God. And then it was said, His command is that you should not accept servitude to anyone besides Him. The word ibadah is used here. And then it concludes, ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمِ 12:40. This is the firm and established deen. Conclusion. From this, the reality becomes clear that according to the Quran, God's ibadah means to accept His authority, to obey His laws. This is what is called ad-deen.
Thus, the meaning of deen is also clarified. Obedience is only to that system and deen in which God's laws are operative and sovereign. Obedience to Quranic laws means accepting God's authority. As I mentioned earlier, let me repeat, when God declared that his authority or sovereignty is not like the authority of a dictator, he also sent down a code of laws. Obedience to this code of laws is what it means to accept his authority. In today's terms, you could say that God's government is a constitutional government, a rule of law, a government of laws, and what laws they are. Dear ones, reflect. In human society, if it is merely said that there is rule of law, people consider such a system a blessing for the world. They regard the best system as the one in which law prevails. But the reality of human-made laws is that today one law is made, tomorrow it is replaced by another. Leave aside dictatorships and monarchies, where everything runs according to the ruler's whims and laws hardly exist. Orders change constantly.
Even in what you call democracy, where the right of governance is given to humans themselves, the situation is such that the very parliament members who today form a majority can tomorrow amend their own laws, and if the majority shifts by just a couple of members, the opposing party comes into power and enacts new laws that contradict the previous ones. In such systems, laws keep changing every day. In contrast, the nature of God's laws is entirely different. They are not man-made laws, but laws given by a being far above humanity. Their unique quality is لا تبديل لكلمات الله. There is no change in the words of Allah. God's code of life is immutable. God has given his laws in his book and declared them complete. وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا. The word of your Lord has been perfected in truth and justice. This is a complete code of life. There is no need for any addition. لا مبدل لكلماته. No one can change his words. Thus, this code of life is complete, immutable, and preserved. God then says, examine this code, understand it, test it. If your heart is convinced that it is truly worthy, then live under it. If humanity desires a life of dignity and happiness, it must accept this code and establish its system accordingly. How much peace and satisfaction a nation gains when it accepts such a code of laws, with the certainty that it will never change. Not only will today's government not alter it, but no future government can, no human can. Even God will not change his laws. Now here lies a profound point, dear ones. Someone might say, fine, no human can change these laws, but if tomorrow God sends another prophet, then through him God could give new laws that contradict or amend the previous ones. Wouldn't that be possible? Then how can these laws be truly immutable? How can we be assured that the laws we pledge to live under today will remain unchanged? For this, God has given assurance. Be at peace. We have declared the finality of prophethood. After this, no prophet will come who could claim that God has changed these laws. Reflect on the kind of system God has given, so complete that no one can ever come forward and say God has altered these laws and I bring those changes. Prophethood itself has been sealed. A universal system has been given for all humanity until the day of judgment. One prostration that saves from 1,000 prostrations. Its meaning is God's worship, God's servitude, his obedience, his authority, and submission to him. This is what happens when a believing servant stands before God and says, Iyyaka na'budu. Think about it. On one hand, he gains immense peace of heart, and on the other, he declares a great revolution. We will not accept anyone else's authority, only yours. Within this servitude, there's another subtle point. In Arabic, ta'bidun means to tame a camel or horse so that it becomes fit to be harnessed. That is, to train a wild animal so that it uses its strength and abilities according to a set rule and discipline. God has granted human beings many abilities and powers. If a person uses these powers not for the benefit of humanity, but keeps his emotions rebellious and unrestrained, whether personally for his own desires or collectively for his nation's interests, the result is nothing but corruption and destruction. But if these same abilities are used within the limits of God, according to his prescribed laws and regulations, then the outcome is universal nurturing and the constructive development of one's own self. The difference between flowing water and floodwater. From this perspective, the meaning of worship, ibadah, is to use one's powers and abilities according to God's laws. The example of a flood makes this clearer. A river contains immense water. If that river flows within its banks, it produces constructive results. But if it forgets its banks, breaks through them and becomes unrestrained, then that same water is no longer a river, but a flood, bringing destruction everywhere. That water did not accept God's servitude, it became rebellious. The Quran calls this rebellion shaytaniyah. It means he no longer remained subject to God, but became subject to Satan. He adopted the way of rebellious forces. If he acted under his own emotions, he himself became a Satan, and his satanic rebellion produced destruction. If this rebellion was collective, then the system itself became one that rejected God's laws, and its result was a flood. Thus, the meaning and purpose of worship, ibadah, is ta'bidun, to discipline and train one's abilities so that they remain active within the boundaries of law and order. The necessary result of righteous deeds, establishment of authority. Now, recall once again the verse of Surah An-Nur 24:55, which has appeared before. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. God's promise, his unchanging law, is that the necessary result of faith and righteous deeds in this world is statehood, governance, and khilafah, or succession of authority. History bears witness that nations who adopted this way were granted succession and authority in this world. But this succession was not an end in itself. For what purpose was it given? The answer is in the same verse, وَلَيُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَى لَهُمْ. It was so that they could establish, strengthen, and firmly uphold the system that God has chosen and approved for them. Thus, the state and authority that comes as a result of faith and righteous deeds is granted for the establishment of deen. The natural result of establishing deen, peace of heart and contentment. Now, what happens when deen is firmly established, tamakkun? The first thing is, وَلَيُبَدِّلَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا. He will surely replace their fear with peace. Man attains complete security. No fear, no grief remains. As I mentioned earlier, if a person has before him a code of laws, which he through knowledge and insight accepts with full satisfaction of heart and mind as beneficial, and pledges to live by it, then from that very moment he attains peace. And if he further has the certainty that this code of laws he has adopted will never change, then this peace becomes permanent. It gains continuity and eternity, which is expressed as خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. They will abide therein forever. Thus, he lives forever in a life of peace, knowing it cannot be altered. Within such a state, he becomes capable of يَعْبُدُونَنِي. That is, they accept only God's authority. Worship possible only in a free state. As I said earlier, God's worship, ibadah, can only truly be performed within one's free state, whose purpose is the establishment of deen. Here it is said, يَعْبُدُونَنِي. They will worship me alone, accept my authority. لَا يُشْرِكُونَ بِي شَيْئًا. And they will not associate anything with me. This is the meaning of shirk. The greatest shirk. The greatest shirk is when governance belongs to one, but authority is accepted from another. Dear ones, as I explained, when in religion God's worship was translated as worship in the sense of ritual devotion, then shirk came to mean idol worship. That is, governance belongs to one, but authority is accepted from another. If we merely perform worship, for example, offering prayer and saying we are worshiping God, then we deceive ourselves into thinking the purpose of deen is fulfilled, because religion says you should be able to worship God and no one should force you to worship idols. But worship can exist under any government. True ibadah cannot. Ibadah only exists in that succession on earth, istikhlafun fil ard, which comes for the establishment of deen. And here too it is clear, يَعْبُدُونَنِي, they will worship me alone, without associating anything with me. This is the meaning of shirk. Before the Quran, worship meant ritual devotion. Before moving further, one important point needs clarification. The Quran was revealed in the Arabic language. At the time of its revelation, deen no longer remained anywhere, only religion existed. In religion, the concept was not God's authority, but his worship. Thus, Arabic-speaking religious communities and the polytheists of Arabia understood the word ibadah to mean worship because they had no concept of authority or sovereignty of God. Among the religious communities, Jews, Christians, and even the Magians of Persia, the concept of God was limited to worship. The Quraysh following them also understood ibadah as worship, and they worshipped idols. Therefore, when in the Quran this word is attributed to them, it carries the meaning of worship according to their understanding, but when attributed to God, to the community of believers, to the Muslim Ummah, its meaning is not worship, but submission to God's authority. So, among religious communities, ibadah meant worship. Among the Muslim Ummah living under God's system, ibadah meant submission to His authority. Keep this distinction in mind because in some places in the Quran, when the word appears on the tongues of others, it carries their meaning of worship, but for us it means submission to God's authority. The fundamental difference between deen and religion lies in the meaning of ibadah and worship. In light of these realities, dear ones, we now arrive at the point where the distinction between the purpose, aim, and ultimate end of deen and religion becomes clear. You may recall that I had previously presented this verse, and now at this stage it shines forth with clarity. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَنِي. In the world of religion, wherever you look, in whichever Quran you consult, the translation given is, "We did not create jinn and humans except that they worship me." The deeper meaning of jinn and ins need not concern us here. Broadly, it refers to people of settled, civilized life and those of nomadic desert life. In short, all human beings. According to religion, it is said they were created so that they may worship God. Thus, religion interprets God's statement as, "We created humans only so that they may keep worshiping me." In other words, the purpose of human creation is ritual devotion, constant worship, as if God forbid God had some task to be done, and to fulfill that task, He created mankind. Humanity, then, has no purpose of its own. Its only purpose is to carry out God's task. If they do not, God becomes displeased and the thought of His punishment terrifies them. If they obey, He becomes pleased. So all worship, all rituals, all acts of devotion are performed merely to keep God pleased and to avoid His anger and punishment. How the concept of worship altered our psychology. Instead of God's sovereignty and authority, religion introduced the concept of worship, puja, parastish. This changed even our psychology. In religion, the image of God in the human mind is, do this, don't do that. Walk this way, don't walk that way. All of this is seen as God's own program which He demands from us. We ourselves have no share in it, no purpose of our own, no goal of our own. Our only goal is, if we do it, He will reward us. If we don't, He will punish us. It is like when we hire laborers or masons to build a house according to our design. Their only concern is the wages they will receive. They have no interest in why the house is being built, who will live in it, or what its purpose is. Their sole interest is their payment. If told to dig the foundation, they dig. If told to raise the wall, they raise it. If told to lay the roof, they lay it. If they do it, the owner is pleased. If not, he is displeased, dismisses them, and withholds their wages. Thus, in religion, the human being is reduced to a laborer working only for reward or punishment. The purpose of the construction, the larger plan of life, is not his concern. His only concern is wages. In religion, worship is seen as pleasing God. In religion,
The concept of worship and ritual devotion, parastish or puja, is that whatever a human does, it is only so that God may become pleased. Man himself has no purpose, no goal. Nothing of his own is improved by it, rather it is imagined that something of God's is improved. God forbid, it is as if he had some program that required humans to fulfill it. This is the religious concept. In Deen, obedience is for human benefit. In Deen, the concept is entirely different. Whatever is commanded, live in this way, establish this kind of system, none of it is for God's own benefit. God forbid, he has no unfinished task that requires humans to complete it. Rather, it is for your benefit that he commands it. It is like a doctor giving instructions to a patient. The doctor's health does not improve by those instructions. The patient's health does. If the patient follows them, his health is restored. If he disobeys, the doctor's health is unaffected, but the patient suffers. In the same way, God has given humans directives. Live according to these laws. Follow this guidance. The purpose is that if you do so, your life will be set right. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes whatever is commanded, it is not to fulfill God's own purpose, it is for your own good. The Quranic meaning of shukr. In Surah Luqman, the very first directive is Anishqur lillahi. This is usually translated as give thanks to Allah, but the deeper meaning of shukr is to use your abilities according to God's laws so that they produce full results. Thus the verse means employ your capacities in line with the purpose God has set for you. It is not about fulfilling any need of God. Listen carefully. وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ. Whoever practices shukr, he does so for his own self. He does not improve God's work, he improves his own self, increases his own excellence, nurtures his own abilities. And then, وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. And whoever rejects, it harms nothing of ours. Allah is free of all needs, worthy of praise. God was worthy of praise even when the universe and mankind did not exist. If he had required humans for his own purposes, then before their existence, his work would have been incomplete. But no, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. God is free of all needs. Thus, it is only your own life that is improved. Every divine guidance is for human benefit. Surah Al-An'am verse 104, listen carefully. قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ بَصَائِرُ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. Clear insights have come to you from your Lord. It is as if the sun has risen, light has spread, and the paths have been illuminated. This is what he has done. But by giving this light and illuminating the paths, he has no personal purpose of his own. Then it says, فَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ فَلِنَفْسِهِ. Whoever sees with open eyes, it is for his own benefit. وَمَنْ عَمِيَ فَعَلَيْهَا. And whoever walks with closed eyes, it is to his own loss. The benefit is his own, and the loss is his own. Neither do those who walk with open eyes benefit God, nor do those who walk blindly harm him. Human free will is central. It is further explained, God does not wish to beat humans into submission, forcing them to walk on one path. He does not say, we gave you light, now open your eyes, or else we will force them open. No, this is not the case. The fundamental characteristic of man is his choice and free will. If this choice and will were taken away, he would fall below the level of humanity. God's role is only to explain. You stand at a crossroads. This path leads here, that path leads there. We have illuminated the way, we have placed signposts. If you walk the right path, you will reach your destination. If you choose the wrong path, you will go astray. The consequences are yours alone. God is not a taskmaster. وَمَا أَنَا عَلَيْكُمْ بِحَفِيظٍ. I am not set over you as a keeper. Man walks for his own benefit. وَمَنْ ضَلَّ فَإِنَّمَا يَضِلُّ عَلَيْهَا.
Whoever goes astray, he only harms himself. وَمَا أَنَا عَلَيْكُمْ بِوَكِيلٍ. I am not appointed over you as a guardian. God has no personal purpose for which he must force humans on a particular path. If they do not wish to seek their own good, he does not compel them. The Prophet's last words, God is my best companion. Dear ones, let us move forward. In Surah Al-Ankabut, it is said, وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ. Whoever strives, he strives only for his own self. And the next words make it even clearer. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَغَنِيٌّ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ. Indeed, Allah is free of need from the worlds. God is independent of the entire universe. He does not want anything done for himself, nor does he need anyone to carry out his work. As I said earlier, God was God even when the universe did not exist. His programs were active even then when nothing else was present. Thus, when he commands, it is not to fulfill his own needs, but like a wise and compassionate guide, a reformer, a counselor, he speaks for the benefit of mankind. He says, if you live this way, your own self will be refined. Your life will become more beautiful. Illustrations through poetry. What a profound point. A Persian verse expresses it beautifully. Hikayate Qude ue yare dil nawaz kunam. Bain bahane magar umre khud daraz kunam. I narrate the tale of that beloved friend not to praise his stature, but by this pretext I prolong my own life. So when we mention God, when we recount his story, when we obey his commands, it is not for his benefit, but for our own. Another verse says, Teri jalwagahe jamal mein mera zoq-e deed nikhar gaya. Teri zof fashani-e husn ne meri hayraton ko saja diya. And earlier it was said, Ye ek sajda jise tu gara samajhta hai. Hazar sajde se deta hai aadmi ko najat. Man outwardly prostrates to God, but in reality, that one prostration frees him from countless forms of slavery and subjugation. Another poet said, Tere sange dar ne badal diya hai ye pastiyon ko faraz mein, ke hazaro arsh jhalak rahe hain meri jabine niyaz mein. Each prostration in God's presence beautifies man's forehead of devotion. When the forehead touches his threshold, neither the stone nor its owner gains anything. Rather, it is man's own being that is elevated. His forehead reflects thousands of heavens. Man as a mirror of divine attributes. Gradually, man's being becomes a mirror of God's attributes within the limits of humanity. On a small scale, man becomes a reflection of God's qualities. It is his own self that is refined. Nothing of God is altered. And when man errs, God says, Ya hasratan alal ibadi. 36:30. Alas for the servants. How compassionate and merciful he is. He desires that man should become refined, should fulfill the purpose, should mold himself into the intended form. As the poet Asghar said, शुआए मेहर खुद बेताब है जज्बे तमन्ना से हकीकत वरना सब मालूम है परवाज़ शबनम की. Whoever interferes in God's law commits shirk. The rays of the sun themselves desire that the drop of water, which if left alone would fall into the dust and be lost, should instead be lifted by the wings of Jibreel to the highest heights, so that it may enter the court of divine beauty and add more grace to its own being. وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ. In Surah Luqman, it is further said, Ya bunayya la tushrik billahi inna ash-shirka la zulmun azim. O my son, do not associate anything with Allah. Surely shirk is a great injustice. As I explained earlier in Arabic, the meaning of zulm is not being in the place where one ought to be. Thus, shirk is the greatest injustice because it displaces both God and man from their rightful positions. The meaning of shirk. Shirk means
to associate anyone else in God's authority, even one's own emotions. The moment you give someone else the position that belongs only to God, then God no longer remains unique at his station, for you have added another partner. But God's attribute is Qul huwallahu ahad. Say, He is Allah, the One. He is unique, without partner. On the other side, man's dignity lies in never bowing before any force of the universe. For the universe has been subjected to him. He is the one before whom angels were commanded to prostrate. If he bows before any cosmic force, he loses his rightful place. If he bows before another human, he falls from the station of human equality. Thus, in shirk, neither God remains at his rightful place nor man at his, and man falls into such humiliation and degradation that in the words of Iqbal, 1877 to 1938, पानी पानी कर गई मुझको कलंदर की ये बात, तू झुका जब गैर के आगे न मन तेरा न तन. The matter ends there. Man ceases to be truly human. The reality of worship. True worship or ibadah is submission to God's authority, obedience to his laws. This obedience is for man's own refinement, his own growth, his own beauty. God gains nothing from it. The real meaning of the story of Iblis and Adam. Now, let us move a step further. Shirk also includes when man becomes subject to his own uncontrolled desires, obeying his passions without restraint. This is rebellion against God's laws, and the Quran calls this shaitan. In the story of Adam, I will explain that Iblis and shaitan are not external beings. They are names for human states of rebellion. Whenever man's emotions defy divine values, the Quran calls that shaitan. The Quran says, Alam ahad ilaykum ya bani Adama, Allah ta'budu shaitana. 36:60. O children of Adam, did I not command you not to accept the servitude of shaitan? If ibadah here meant worship in the ritual sense, the verse would make no sense. No one worships shaitan. Shaitan is man's own rebellious emotions. Thus the command is, do not bow before cosmic forces, do not bow before other humans, and do not bow before your own rebellious passions. Keep them within the bounds of God's values. Hence, Allah ta'budu shaitana, do not accept servitude to shaitan. Wa ani buduni, accept only my authority. This is the straight path. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim 1:5. Its meaning is, never allow your emotions to become rebellious, but keep them subject to God's laws. Thus, Hada siratun mustaqim, this is the straight path. The meaning of taghut. The Quran uses another term, and that is taghut. Taghut means every force that rebels against God. This can be man's own self or other humans. Wherever any law, system or government, whether from within man himself or from others, rebels against God's laws, the Quran calls it taghut. Worship means submission to God's authority. From these explanations, dear ones, you understand that the meaning of God's worship, ibadah, is to accept His authority, to take all decisions from Him. And taking decisions from Him means to take them from His book. Because He has said, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, they are the transgressors, they are the wrongdoers, they are the disbelievers. So the real issue is, from where are decisions taken and which law is obeyed? These are the meanings of God's servitude, ubudiyah. Now look at the opposite. These rebellious emotions and forces, the Quran says to avoid them, not to submit to them. Alam tara ila allazina yaz'umuna annahum amanu bima unzila ilayka wa ma unzila min qablak. 4:60. Have you not seen those who claim to believe in what was revealed to you and what was revealed before you? They think they are Muslims, believers, faithful to God's book and earlier scriptures. Yet their condition is, yuriduna an yatahakamu ila taghut. 4:60. They wish to take their disputes to taghut.
That is, they want to have their affairs decided by non-divine forces, accept their governments, submit to their authority, adopt their laws, and regulate their affairs under them. But the Quran makes it clear. وَقَدْ أُمِرُوا يَكْفُرُوا بِهِ 4:60. They were commanded to reject it. Instead, they were told to submit only to God's authority. The revolutionary declaration of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. From these verses, dear ones, you see that when a believing servant says, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, 4:1, we accept only your authority, its meaning is profound. This is a great revolutionary slogan. It is the same as La ilaha illallah. There is no authority except God. This is a declaration of reality. And then it is said, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, 4:1. We practically live by this. We accept no law, no authority except God's. As the poet said, Sarvari zeba faqat uz zaat behamta ko hai, hukmara hai ik wahi, baqi butane azari. The practical reality in our worship. Now reflect, dear ones. In every rakah of prayer we recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and in every rakah we declare Iyaka nabudu 4:1. We accept no authority but yours, we obey none but you. Standing in the mosque facing the Qibla, we announce this. Yet what is our practice? All our decisions are made under non-divine laws. Neither the system is based on God's law, nor the government, nor obedience to his law. And yet we continue to declare, Ya Kemabudu 4:1. What a great self-deception this is. God says, يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ 2:9. They deceive Allah and those who believe, but they deceive none except themselves. Rituals without the system of deen. This self-deception lies in the fact that the symbols and pillars of deen, which were meant to establish a living system, are preserved only as rituals. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. Prayer remains with its rakahs, standing, bowing and prostration. Psalm fasting remains with its timings, abstinence during the day and breaking fast at sunset. Hajj remains as a great gathering, but only as a ritual. These were once vital components of the system of deen, parts of a great machine. But now the system is gone, the machine is gone, the program is gone. We preserve these rituals in form and deceive ourselves into thinking we are living by deen. A soldier's discipline is not the ultimate purpose. I often give this example. In the army, a soldier is given a program, rules and regulations. These rules are so detailed that even how he ties his boot laces, where he fastens his belt, how he buttons his uniform, how he lifts his rifle, how he steps, how he marches, how he halts, all are prescribed. If he violates even slightly, it is considered breaking the law and he is punished. Such discipline is of great importance. Throughout his military life, he must observe these rules. But this is not the ultimate purpose. The purpose of all these rules and regulations is that one day, if he must go to the battlefield to defend his faith, his country or his nation, he should be ready to sacrifice his life without hesitation. That is the true objective. It may be that in his entire life he never faces such a situation, yet he must observe discipline daily. This is because discipline is the means to achieve that higher goal, not the goal itself. Ritual without purpose. Now imagine if there is no state, no army, no command, and a soldier takes his uniform home, wears it every morning, ties his boots, buttons his shirt, picks up a stick instead of a rifle, and marches in the village streets for 45 minutes as if on parade.
Also, does this fulfill the purpose for which he was trained? Of course not. In the army, these actions were a means to a higher goal. Here, he has mistaken them as the goal itself. This is the difference between deen and religion. In religion, the pillars of deen, prayer, zakah, fasting, hajj, are preserved as rituals, without their purpose being realized. But when the system of deen is established, these same pillars exist, yet they are parts of a living program. They are not ends in themselves, but means to a greater purpose, nurturing individuals, disciplining the community, instilling noble values, and preparing society for higher goals. The meaning of إياك نعبد. 1. 4. So dear ones, keep in mind the word ta'bid, to train a wild animal, so that it uses its abilities according to law and order, not for its own whims, but for the purpose for which it was trained. Even a well-trained horse, if harnessed to a carriage meant to go to the railway station, but instead runs off toward another town, then despite its training, it has not fulfilled the purpose for which it was disciplined. This is the meaning of worship, ibadah, to discipline one's abilities so they are used according to God's laws, not for personal whims, but for the higher purpose set by Him. Thus, the declaration إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ 1:4 means, we accept no law, no discipline, no authority except yours. This is the first part of Surah Al-Fatiha's 4th verse. The next part is وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ 1:4, and you alone we ask for help. This takes us further into a deeper and wider subject, which we'll explore in the next lesson. رَبَّنَا أَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Our Lord, accept from us. Indeed, you are the all-hearing, the all-knowing.